Hi, this is Anthony. Welcome back to my show. First of all, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you haven't already, I would appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button, and hopefully you'll hit the like button at the end. Second, the title of this video starts out, if you would have done some research. I get a couple messages here and there from people that start out that way, or if you would have done your own research, and then they either continue with something vague that doesn't necessarily contradict any facts that I've said, or else they continue with something where they themselves have overlooked a fact or have misstated or perhaps misinterpreted what is a known or thought to be fact in the case. That being said, I don't want anyone whom I answer in a video like this to think that I'm turning the phrase back on them. I'm not saying to them, if you would have done your own research. Rather, I just think it's kind of a funny phrase and it would make a funny thumbnail. So, when I'm looking at negative comments from people in videos like this, I'm likely to blur out their names simply because I'm not trying to humiliate or ridicule them. However, these are all public comments that anyone on the internet can see if they wanted to look through my comment section. But the ones that I select are ones that I think are representative of broader issues that people still have that I want to address, and perhaps they'll understand the situation a little bit more as I do. And if I see the comment is fairly neutral or even positive, I'll leave the person's name up. Again, because these are already publicly posted comments, not anything privately emailed to me. And today I'm just going to kind of go backwards from what I've gotten, and this one just came in a few minutes ago. They say, I know very little about any of this. I found Mike Rinder and Leah Remini a while ago, and I really found a home in their videos. I've never been in a cult, but I was in a relationship with a psychotic individual that cost me more than I can say, so I absolutely needed to hear a great deal of what is being said on their channel. I have questions about the current distress that is happening among these people that I have come to care about. I feel that Aaron needs to take some time for himself and figure all this out before he hurts himself and his supporters. I really appreciate your video for the discernment and caring that you put into it. I agree with many of your points. I also appreciated the fact that you were open and honest, telling us you personally care about all of the people involved. The people bringing us all of this information about the problems with Scientology have put themselves in positions of judgment, whether or not that was their intention. It's a difficult position to be in if you're not living a life above reproach. How many of us are? I really hope that they will ultimately choose to work together and give the help that is needed to some of their number. I appreciate your stoic and sober narrative, and I personally trust that you have thought everything through before speaking. Well, thank you very much for those comments. They're beautifully put together. I pretty much agree with you. It does seem like Aaron continues to admit that he's getting very little sleep from the videos that he's posted recently. But I think mentally he's moved on and is in a positive mental space now. I heard his comments about his experience talking to the host of Down the Rabbit Hole, and I think that appearing on her show allowed him to express some things that have been bottled up inside him. And I think that that's true for a lot of people. Sometimes before you can get over something, you have to literally say it or write it to a person that you trust, or perhaps the person that you're involved with. So I think that from my perspective, which is not a therapist or anything like that, he's starting to make some very positive progress in this journey of healing from being removed from the Aftermath Foundation and the others associated issues with that. Thanks for your comment. Tammy M62 says, I was in agreement with you up until you began talking about the other members of the board. The removing of Aaron could have been handled very differently. All these families vacationed together. They went on cruises several years in a row together, and Mark, Mike, and Aaron were once called the Three Amigos. These people were more than just friends. Your description and justification of the removal of Aaron, I would say, would be spot on if you were talking about a board members that are not as close as these guys and their families seem to be. Thank you, Tammy, for your comments. I agree with you for the most part. Certainly, I think that more should have been done that might have resulted in Aaron's leaving the Aftermath Foundation. on what he believes are his own terms, so that there was little, if any, hard feelings and no negative public backlash, which we've seen in hundreds of comments that I've gotten and thousands that Aaron has gotten. I think the individuals in question were genuinely friends, and I know that a lot of people won't agree with me on this, but I think that it was extremely difficult for them to make the decision to remove Aaron. We may not know all the details, but we do know some, and there were protracted negotiations and moving time frames over the summer and early autumn. I know that people in particular, Mark and Clara and Mike, are getting a lot of criticism from certain quarters, but let's not worry about their past Scientology experience at this point. Let's look at just being on the board. Boards are made up of humans, and humans make mistakes. Aaron has admitted that he made some mistakes. Did the board handle things as good as possible? It may not. Or it may be not the case. Maybe they made some mistakes also. While there are organizations that provide board training, most board members have very little, if any, training to be on a board of directors of a nonprofit. These are people, in this case, who live in different states, and so their meetings are in part via Zoom or some other online method. They're busy people with their own jobs and raising kids and having family issues and health issues and all the things that the average person has to deal with. Neither Scientology nor general life necessarily prepares you to deal with some of the issues that you face when you're on a nonprofit board. Should they have hired the services of a mediator or a consultant or even a therapist who could work through some of these issues? In hindsight, yes. But often when you're dealing with such issues and you're not even aware of the potential solutions, then you just muddle your way the best way that you can. I think that there are some further questions that I'll be answering that touch upon some of these issues, so I think I'll end up here. But again, I thank you, and I agree on a lot of what you said. Thank you very much. Michelle Anderson says, a very thoughtful video, well done. Well, thank you, Michelle Anderson. I really appreciate these nice comments. I do get a fair number along these lines, but I'm not going to put all the praise in these videos simply because people are going to get turned off by it. But I do appreciate people who appreciate the hard work that I put into these. And then the next one says, I think you're pretty charitable to Aaron. Of course, his side of these tales are going to minimize his culpability, but taking a step back, there are multiple instances of him having contact with police, with hiding key facts and living in deception. I think he's downplaying his substance use and its relationship to his problems. He was drunk or high when several of these physical confrontations occurred. As you noted, as a private citizen, he can do whatever he wants. That said, plenty of people would have problems with it. People who may want to donate or support the Aftermath Foundation. The board of directors has every right to police their members. Again, there's a lot that you write here that I agree with. I think that it's often human nature to downplay culpability in one's own actions, but the more that one can say, at least to themselves, yeah, I screwed up. These are the things I did that led to a dangerous situation, and I'm not going to engage in those type of activities again. Now, whether somebody says that publicly or not isn't as important as whether they can admit it to themselves and then take the action to really implement better behavior. As far as his drinking and drug use, I'm surprised he even brought up some of it on Down the Rabbit Hole video, but certainly it would explain certain things and also point out more potential problems that he may have just dodged a bullet on. For instance, the white powder from Colombia, he admitted he tried once in Florida, and then once when he went to the white powder capital of Colombia on a boys' trip. I think that very few people would say that utilizing that substance is a good idea. But it just seems like incredibly poor judgment to be anywhere around in a foreign country like Colombia doing that. This is literally where scenarios come into play where you're set up and busted by dealers or busted by the police or kidnapped by narco-terrorists. And I think that he's made it clear he's not interested in pursuing that particular substance any further. But there's a whole host of legal and illicit substances that one should either completely avoid or really be cautious in consuming them, especially when you're basically a public figure and past experience with them has led to run-ins with the police or nearly so. As far as whether he told the truth completely about his use on some of those, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because I don't know anything to the contrary. But again, I agree with you on most of what you say here, and I appreciate you saying it. Robert Brown says, Aaron has some issues. That's pretty clear. I'm sure his number one mission in life is the destruction of Scientology. Saving Scientologists is secondary. I think that's a critical distinction and colors not only what he does, but who he is. Aaron would heal better and probably stay out of trouble if he'd get himself a new, positive life goal. My response is I'm not sure if Aaron's number one goal is the destruction of Scientology and helping ex-Scientologists being secondary. If one sat down and recorded everything he said about the two subjects, you might be able to prove your point. I think no matter what, he genuinely wants to help people escape and recover from Scientology. I think that you bring up some good points, but along the lines of what you say, I think that if his new life goal is to create a new organization, one that's similar to the Aftermath Foundation, but as he described, perhaps has an expanded mission, that this might be a positive goal that he can focus on, and again, hopefully avoiding a repetition of past unfortunate behavior. I think for many people, not just him, but perhaps Aaron included, they may have experienced a great amount of trauma and have never worked with a therapist, perhaps because they, from where they come from in such a cult of Scientology, it looks down upon any type of mental illness therapy other than so-called Scientology tech. And I think that for some people, they feel they're too macho to talk to a therapist. I have no idea, in the 20 or so years since Aaron and his wife left Scientology, what therapy, if any, they may have received. I'm not even going to publicly suggest that he seek some type of therapy or counseling, but I think in general, for anybody that might benefit from that, they should investigate avenues to obtain such resources. PChris6662 says, thanks for the recap. I'm still just so shocked that everyone is trying to hold Aaron up to this standard of conduct that is straight out of the 1950s. His marital situation is so utterly none of our business in any way beyond, and way beyond our place to comment. It's unfathomable to me in this day and age. He stayed officially married for his kids' sake. End of story. People need to shut up and don't judge. Staying married for the kids is 5,000 times more honorable than just making random baby mamas, pumping out kids and abandoning them to the welfare system, and millions of men are doing that every day. Where is the outrage over that? As for LA, he has very clearly said that he definitely learned his lesson, and I believe him. I've known one psycho chick back in the day, and he got off lucky, and there was no reason to leave him dangling on a chair for the rest, or a chain for the rest of his life, for something that at the end of the day he was a victim. But the board clearly wants him to dance on strings forever for them and beg forgiveness. That's not how it works. You either forgive him or you fire him on the spot. You don't hold it over his head for months. Get real, folks. This is 2023, not 1950. Aaron pointed out he has done more to help Scientology victims than those remaining board members combined. Count how many videos are on his channel and count how many Aftermath Foundation videos there are. Aaron is real. He's open and transparent. If I were a scared Scientologist, I would go to Aaron way before Mike Rinder, of all people. Finally, I'm still burning up with insults after being tagged a keyboard warrior by Rinder. Mad? Yes, boiling mad. They love us keyboard warriors when we're shouting against Scientology. They love us when we're marching in front of the big blue building with signs. They love us when we donate money. They love us when we support them. But when we point out their mistakes, we are thrown right under the bus and dismissed. They are fickle backstabbers, and I wouldn't trust them to walk my dog. Well, thank you for thanking me for the recap. I do understand what you're saying here, and I think that As a society, we need to be conscious to adapt our norms and expectations to a level where our civilization is currently located at, and that's often a moving target. And what I mean by that is, yes, I agree with you that if somebody is married and is staying married for the benefit of their children by mutual consent with their spouse, but they are for all intents and purposes living apart from their spouse and living the life, as Aaron repeatedly termed it, living the life of a bachelor, I think most of us can now accept that. I don't have any problem with Aaron engaging in the lifestyle, assuming that what he said was by mutual consent with his wife. But if you're going to publicly pretend that you're married and living with your wife when you're talking about it on videos, when you're not, and when you're engaging in not just intimate relations with other women, but other risky behavior, which he outlined, you're playing with fire when you're a high visibility actor on the anti-Scientology stage. I think that if you asked the general public if they could name an anti-Scientology figure, that the most common name would probably be Leah Remini. I think that if you ask people who watched such matter on YouTube, the number one name by far would be Aaron Smith Levin. Now, as I point out, a nonprofit is an entity in itself. Sure, it's made up of board members, but it's the Aftermath Foundation, not the Aaron Smith Levin Foundation. Aaron doesn't get a pass because he's raised the most money from it. Mike Rinder doesn't lose his right to action as a voting board member just because he used to be the biggest jerk in the Scientology world. Most bylaws allow a board member to be removed for any reason by other board members. The Aftermath Foundation had what was basically a morals clause. Does it in a way sound like a 1950s mentality? A little bit. But it was in the bylaws that were voted on. This was not a recent document. This was the original bylaws that Luis Garcia put together, in which everyone, including Aaron, voted to enact. Him not paying attention or not realizing what it said is no excuse for breaking it. I understand that what happened in Los Angeles was not really Aaron's fault. He hooked up with somebody that it turned out likely has some very severe mental issues. And quite frankly, sometimes people can mask those for a while and you don't find out until it's too late. Again, I think most people in this day and age understand that Aaron is separated and they don't care if he hooks up and is intimate with other women. He admitted that drinking and psychedelic mushrooms were involved. Drinking is obviously not illegal, but we know from what Aaron has said he's gotten into trouble before with problematic alcohol consumption. Are psychedelic mushrooms legal in the state of California? I don't know, but quite frankly, I'm fairly anti-recreational drug because you often don't know what you're getting. And especially on mind-altering substances like mushrooms or LSD, things can go downhill pretty quickly. Has he learned his lesson there? He says he has, and I take people at their word. But has he had previous problematic encounters? Yes. There was the Mardi Gras incident where the police were called because he got drunk and rowdy. Certainly he's not the first person in the history of Mardi Gras who has been in that situation. But does it potentially indicate a problem? Possibly. And then there was the fight at the cigar lounge. I had heard him talk about it quite a while ago, and I had forgotten some of the details. He recounted the story yesterday. This was when he was running for the city council, and he was collecting signatures on a periodic basis at that cigar lounge. I think he may have just qualified to be on the ballot or something along those lines on that night. A woman that he knew and seemed to kind of like came in with her boyfriend, and I think Aaron gave her a hug, and then they sat down at the far end of the bar from Aaron. Evidently, another guy sitting next to Aaron was commenting about the woman's attractiveness, and Aaron admitted that he is a loud talker and talks even louder when he's drinking. And it's clear that they were speaking of a sexual nature concerning the woman whose boyfriend eventually came down and punched Aaron. Was that appropriate? No, not at all. But is that what one might expect if you're talking about how sexy and crazy you think a woman might be in bed when she and her boyfriend can hear what you're saying in a bar? One might expect that. Although again, it doesn't justify violence. And then I think Aaron called the woman a bad word starting with the letter C that I won't repeat here. Again, not very good behavior for a regular person just hanging out in a bar. But Aaron was at that time a new candidate for the city council while also being on the Aftermath Foundation. Did he show good judgment in that situation? No, I don't think so. And again, I don't think anyone else has brought up the drug issue before Aaron brought it up. But he talked about using the white powder once in Florida and then again trying it on a boys' trip to Colombia. If one of those experiences would have resulted in an extreme medical issue resulting from a bad reaction or poison in the substance, or resulted in death, or resulted in an arrest by the police in Colombia, or kidnapping by narco traffickers, which one of those scenarios would be good for the reputation of the Aftermath Foundation? Which one of those scenarios is a positive one for his family in general and his wife in particular? Which of those scenarios has the general public evaluating it today any differently than it would in the 1950s? This seems to be starting a chain of bad decisions that isn't going to lead to a positive outcome. Again, as I've mentioned in many, many videos, people are not happy with the procedures that were taken and the outcome of the vote. But when you have a case like this, it needs to be investigated, and you can't just fire somebody right away. That's generally not how people leave organizations or companies. There are rules that you need to follow to protect everybody and investigate what really happened so that you don't make a knee-jerk decision. So I think I'll end here. I know that a lot of what you've said we may have some issues about, but I think that part of the spirit of what you're saying, you and I can agree on. So thank you very much for it. Donna says, I think it's only fair that the entire video should have been watched before forming an opinion. So here Donna is referencing me stating that I did not watch the entire 2 hours and 8 minutes of the interview with Aaron on Down the Rabbit Hole. I agree in spirit that one should try to watch the whole thing if they're going to analyze something. But I think that sometimes you can get a good indication of something without watching the entire interview or reading an entire book. I watched a little over 40 minutes of it. What Aaron said, I've summarized in the previous response. Bad decisions, interactions at bars with law enforcement, a fight and inappropriate language in one of those situations, admitted drug use of various types, admitted problematic alcohol consumption, reckless behavior in his personal life that resulted in injury to both he and inadvertently to the other party in Los Angeles to a degree, and one which could have easily escalated into something worse and could easily have escalated in law enforcement arriving on the scene outside the pharmacy. And of course, we have to remember that one of the linchpins of the whole thing is that afterwards, this crazy woman sent a video to seemingly everybody that was in Aaron's social media network, including members of the Aftermath Foundation board, creating a potential nightmare for them to have to deal with. If I watch the rest of the video, I don't know what Aaron could have said that would have negated the list of reckless activities that he had already engaged in and enumerated. If anything else, he would have just probably kept on digging himself in a deeper hole, if anything. But I don't disagree with you that one should be very cautious if one is not going to watch an entire video or read an entire article or book before commenting on it. Thank you for taking the time to put down your thoughts here. Jojo Granum says, I think you are analyzing the information you've been given as well as you can, but there are two sides to each story. However, I do enjoy listening to you nonetheless. Okay, Jojo, I agree with you that there are usually two or sometimes more than two sides to each story. However, I watch what I think most people would consider to be the two videos from the board members. That's the one with Mike, Mark, and Claire discussing some issues, and then the one followed up by Claire reading the list of issues. And I know that some people didn't like that one, but if you just don't like it because you don't like how Claire reads things, That's not necessarily a good reason to discount it. And I'm not saying that that's you, Jojo, what you're thinking. I'm just saying that some people think that. So there's those two videos, and then Aaron did his video about being off the Aftermath Foundation, and then he followed that up by a longer one that I think was about 20 minutes long, where he talked in more detail. And then he did one after that telling people that he was going live afterwards on the Down the Rabbit Hole video, where he obviously, as we've discussed, talked in great detail about some of the issues. So I think in my mind that I've looked at pretty much the evidence from both sides of his departure from the Aftermath situation. Now, if you're talking about the two sides of the incident in Los Angeles, yes, we only have Aaron's perspective and not Juliana's, but what Aaron said about her behavior I find sounds truthful to me. Aaron admitted that he engaged in reckless behavior, but for the most part, I find that what he said to sound truthful to me. So I hope that answers any questions that you might have about me looking at both sides to an issue. Thank you. Bethany White says, I definitely agree with some of Aaron's choices not being the best. I also saw how the cult has damaged him. I hope he seeks out a trauma therapist who maybe specializes in cult deprogramming. He worried about the appearance of some things he shouldn't have. I imagine it's a huge burden lifted, though. Now he is truly free to move forward and heal, hopefully. I also hope that his 4 so-called friends do the same. I see them Scientology fair game mentality leaking from them for sure. Aaron needs to understand his life choices absolutely will reflect on his career and foundation. He seems like a young man learning to live with his newfound freedom from a cult and likes to party. No judgment. I have funny stories of drinking in my younger years. Never involved the police, but mudding in the fields at 2 a.m. might get people's attention. I wish everyone would have had a very serious talk with Aaron about his situation and given him a warning. Maybe they did and maybe they didn't, but these incidents seem fairly spread out over a period of time, and I don't feel they addressed it super seriously with him. Obviously, Scientology does nothing but worry about their reputation, even though nobody gives a crap. That is why this move seems so Scientology-like. They could have handled this much better between all of them, but they didn't have the skills, it seems. I still don't like Claire or Mike all that much. It's an energy they put out. It's their body language, too. I just don't trust them. Imagine if I was a Scientologist wanting to escape and I go to the Aftermath Foundation. Do you really think I'm going to be comfortable confiding in and trusting the top dogs of Scientology? Heck no. They need to step back and not be the faces. They also need people on the board who aren't from a cult. I think that this is very important, especially when it comes to trust. Mike's entire body language, energy, and words remind me so much of his glory days in Scientology. Talk about triggering. I'm not in Scientology, and it triggered me immediately. Same when Claire did that reading of their response or whatever it was. Mike was very condescending, saying being on the board isn't some high-paying position. It's not a big deal. Really? Sadly, I won't give to that foundation for a while. Have to see how things go. So, Bethany, thank you for your comments. I think that what you have to say is shared by many people who have commented, as well as people who don't comment but still share your feelings. A lot of what you say I kind of addressed a couple questions ago, just as far as a few things that I haven't already addressed in this video. I think that if somebody is leaving Scientology and contacts the Aftermath Foundation, it's clear if they have access to the internet that they can see who's on the foundation board. I think that if the mechanism for people leaving and receiving help from the Aftermath Foundation may vary from case to case. I don't necessarily think that Mike Rinder is showing up at the airport to welcome people to their new city or anything like that. I could certainly understand that if somebody had been personally traumatized by Mike Rinder, that they might choose not to use the Aftermath Foundation, or they may request that Mike not have contact with them, or it may well be that Mike has no contact with them anyway. As far as the board needing non-Scientologists and new faces, that is often harder than it seems. But I agree with you. As I've mentioned in many of my videos, I've been on a couple nonprofit boards and in leadership positions. I was the chairman of one for about 4 years. Another one that used to be quite large in this area, I was the first vice president, which is a particular title, and then later treasurer. I'll tell you, it is very difficult in this day and age when people are so busy to get them to commit to being on a board while they have a job of their own, or perhaps they have their own business, which takes up a lot of time, and they have children or other family issues and health issues. It really is harder than you think to get people to commit what often is quite a bit of time to board service. Now compound that with being on the board of perhaps the most vocal anti-Scientology or ex-Scientology nonprofit in existence, which is very much tied to YouTube channels of its various board members. Who out there wants to join the Aftermath Foundation, especially now? The nonprofit organizations in the past that I were on are only based in the county where I live here in Oregon. We did not do anything outside the county lines, and this was partly because we were limited by certain restrictions. But that being said, if you were to quiz people in this area about if they'd heard of those organizations, you might find each organization being known by perhaps 1,000 people. Now think of the Aftermath Foundation and all the people that watch Mark and Mike and Claire's and Aaron's and Amy's videos and watch them when they're on other people's channels. Now we're dealing with hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And then you see how people take sides on this unfortunate issue, and a lot of people calling Mark and Claire and Mike backstabbers and snakes. And I'm not saying that you're doing that, but people have. So who out there would like to take their place, and then when something goes wrong, when you have to remove a board member or perhaps a volunteer, and then you have literally thousands of people leaving comments on YouTube about how you're a backstabbing snake. Does that sound like a job that you want, especially when you get no compensation for it, but you open yourself up to all kinds of legal consequences, which could result in you having to hire a lawyer, as well as all the headache of dealing with the Church of Scientology trying to fair game you and the general public trying to troll you? And again, this is not directed at the person making the comment. I'm making this just to anyone that's still listening to my video at this point. Okay, I'm going to end now. I sincerely appreciate everyone who watches my videos, who's hit the subscribe button and who's hit the like button, and who's taken the time to comment. I can't put every comment in a video like this, but I do get around to reading every comment and replying to just about everyone when I have the chance. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.